Welcome to Living Well with MS. This show comes to you from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, which helps people live a full and healthy life through the Overcoming MS program. We interview a range of experts and people with multiple sclerosis. Please remember, all opinions expressed are their own. Living Well with MS is listener supported. If you'd like to support us and help keep our show advertiser free, donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. And now, let's meet our guest.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Living Well with MS podcast. Joining me on this edition is Sue Tibbles. Sue was diagnosed with relapse-remitting MS in June 2012. Fortunately, thanks to her son buying her the book, she discovered Overcoming MS about 6 months into her diagnosis. Sue's learned many things over the years so far about living with MS. Also, Sue is a nurse and nearly 5 years ago decided to specialise in MS because she wanted to help people like herself. So she's now an MS nurse, and she's also become a mindfulness practitioner and teacher, and has recently completed an MSc in mindfulness studies. She is currently training to be an Overcoming MS facilitator and looks forward to sharing her experience and knowledge to help others. So first, I'd like to say I think you're one of the best MS nurses, because I would love that. If I had an MS nurse who had MS, then it would save a lot of time explaining things, because they would, the understanding you must have must be awesome for your patients. So firstly, welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Jeff. Unfortunately, I don't have many patients that follow Overcoming MS. I wish I had more. So come see me.
But you do at least you still have an understanding of what they're going through, which I don't think is difficult, isn't it, to explain even to loved ones. They don't, and people say that you don't really get it unless you've got it.
Absolutely.
It's quite a unique thing. So to start with, could you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a bit about your MS journey?
Okay, yeah. Well, you've already said the basics, Jeff, who I am and such like. So yeah, my journey with MS began in 2012, June 2012. A time I will never forget, obviously. So like many people with MS, it started with my eyes. My vision went double. My mum was dying at the time, and my sister kept saying to me, I think I should take you to the hospital. And I was like, it's fine. If I cover this eye, I can see fine. If I cover this eye, I can see fine. But together, forget it. So anyway, I did sit with my mum until she died, and then my sister took me to the hospital, and yeah, I went through that whole battery of tests and sat in hospital for a week waiting for an MRI scan, and was told I'd got MS. I had already diagnosed myself, of course, and I'd said to the neurologist, this is MS, isn't it? And he said, well, we need to do a few more tests, rule a few other things out. But yeah, he came back to me and said it was MS. And I was like, are you absolutely sure? Is there, can there be any doubt? And he was like, no, absolutely not at all. So yeah, it was not what I wanted. Obviously, it was still a shock, even though I'd already diagnosed it, and yeah, I struggled for a good while, and yeah, as you mentioned, and my son had bought me the book, and so I feel very fortunate that I discovered Overcoming MS in that first 6 months, really, and yeah, I kind of thought, I kind of scoffed at it originally, if I'm honest. As a nurse, I'm like, well, how can this be? You can't fix something like MS with this stuff, with diet and everything. And but I picked up that book and started to read it, and it spoke to me and I understood it, and it made a lot of sense. Obviously, as a nurse with a sort of, an understanding of research and evidence base, I I was like, wow, this sounds good. I think I need to give this a go. And so, yeah, I threw myself into it.
And what did you find easy or difficult about adopting lifestyle?
Yeah, so obviously, well, not obviously, you don't know, but so the diet I did straight away. Not too much of a problem, although I have to say it was a massive change for me because, my diet wasn't that bad, but it wasn't the best, and I certainly ate meat and dairy and but that all went overnight. I stopped eating all of those things. I stopped eating processed food. But what I found, looking back on it now, was my food was very bland, and it was just kind of like pasta and vegetables, and not an awful lot of flavor, and over the years, obviously, as I've learned more and become more experimental, I suppose, with cooking foods, using herbs and spices, and making sauces and things from scratch. My food is now quite tasty, I have to say. But back then in the early days, no, it wasn't. But that didn't really matter a lot to me because it was more important to me that I wanted to get well, And I have to say, George's book is amazing, and I do want to do a bit of a shout out to George, because thank you, George. What you've done, the work you've done for overcoming MS, is truly incredible. And I know many people around the world have got you to thank for that.
And how did you find the other aspects? So did you find mindfulness quite easy to implement? I think that's one that often people have trouble with.
Absolutely not. It was probably the most difficult thing for me as well. So I kind of did, the diet, the vitamin D, obviously that's an easy one. Flaxseed oil, I have got a funny story about that one, but maybe not just at the moment. We can come back to that if there's time, maybe. But um, oh, sorry, that's our office phone.
No, that's fine. We can't hear that.
Pardon me. I'm in the office at work. It'll just go to answer phone. So yeah, the exercise, yeah, that was okay as well, not too bad. And but the mindfulness was hard. So I had no clue what I was doing. I hadn't even heard of mindfulness until I discovered overcoming MS. So I was very lucky to go to the Brighton conference in, I think that was 2013. And Craig Hassed was at that conference and did a session on mindfulness, and that was my introduction to mindfulness. I'd never even heard the word before. So and he did this little practice of just becoming aware of sitting on the seat, and I was like, wow, how have I never been aware of this before? So that was my introduction to it. So and I then went away and started to try to practice mindfulness at home, and yeah, failed miserably, really. And since then, obviously, I've done a lot since then, and the reason why I was failing was because I was sitting down to practice mindfulness, and my mind would then start to go at a million miles an hour, and I'd be having all these thoughts, and I was thinking, well, I'm really rubbish at this. I can't do it. And this is really common. I've learned throughout all the rest of my studies. And actually, what I've learned as I've gone on to study mindfulness is that that's actually normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if our minds weren't doing that, there'd probably be something wrong with us. So I thought I couldn't do it, so I didn't really. I was kind of, you know, trying and failing and trying, failing, trying, failing. So eventually I went off to do a course, and that's grown from there with other courses, and then doing the teacher training, and then doing the masters. So yes, I would say it was definitely the most difficult part of the program.
But they do say that, don't they? I mean, if you do it, you're not doing it badly. It's like actually going through the practice of doing it. Don't judge yourself. Don't think, oh, I didn't do that well, because it's really, really unusual when you. I mean, I can almost sort of remember the times when I got completely into a sort of flow state of not thinking about anything else. But it's really rare, isn't it? You'll you
Absolutely,
need to think
it
about
is.
something. Your mind needs to think about something. So that's why they're always sort of getting you to think about your breathing or something. Because if you don't think about your breathing, you'll think about something else, and that'll be the bills you've got to pay, or the dog that needs walking, or whatever else. It'll be off on some tangent somewhere before you know
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. The mind always wants to look for something to do. This is quite often why we, like you say, you focus on the breathing, but we might also, so in the trainings that I would deliver, I'd be when we're in the initial stages of sitting down to practice, we call it settling the mind, because it is possible to settle the mind. So what we do is we count. Because if you're counting, then you're giving the mind something to do, and the
Mm-hmm.
mind is much happier with that. But you know, it's quite a sort of mundane thing. It's not sort of like, you know, a complicated thing, but it gives the mind something to do, and the mind's happy with that. And just by doing that, and then moving on to grounding in the body, and then resting in that state, as we call it in the mindfulness association training, settling, grounding, resting, you can find that the mind will settle, a bit like a sort of muddy glass of water will settle if it's left undisturbed.
So is that a tip that you'd have for people starting a mindfulness habit? I mean, is there sort of tips that you'd have for people?
Yes, although I would say either I don't know, read a book, take a course, um, to learn about it, because it, you know, it is a skill. It's not something that comes naturally to us. You know, sitting down and doing nothing does not come naturally to us, and it it is a practice as well. So, you know, I often say, like, you know, it's called practice for a reason, you know, because we have to practice it, and we need to practice it in order to get better. So yeah, it's a case of keeping at it, you know, making that commitment to say, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes every day, and then, you know, later on, then you can increase that. But I think it really helps to learn about it. Or otherwise, I think it can seem a bit like a sort of almost pointless exercise. It's like, oh, I'm going to sit down here and do nothing, when I could be, you know, washing the car, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
cooking the dinner, or, you know, cleaning the house, or whatever. You know, there's always something else to do, and sitting down doing nothing seems a
It's
bit
funny, isn't
like
it?
a.
Because exercising the body, we don't think that way, but exercising the mind we do. It's sort of like, oh no, I'm doing something productive. I'm doing some exercise. Oh, you're not doing anything productive. You're just sitting there doing nothing. So kind of, I am doing something. I'm exercising my mind rather than my body. But yeah, it's a funny one. Yeah. So,
It
but back
is.
to the sort of the nursing side of things. So, an MS nurse is certainly a role that anyone in the UK with MS would be familiar with, but maybe not worldwide, because we have a worldwide audience. What does an MS nurse do for people who are outside the UK or don't have MS?
Yeah, so an MS nurse, it's it's a good question. I've been doing it all day, Jeff. And so because it varies enormously, but we are here to support people with MS with a diagnosis, and we're here to support them with managing symptoms. We're here to support them with the disease modifying treatments. And I guess that's the kind of main part of our job. And we do that by, so one, we see patients in clinic, but we can't see, well, in the team that I work, we can't see all of our patients because there's just so many of them. We have 3,000 odd patients on our caseload. But we are available to all of our patients via our telephone helpline, where people can leave a message and we will call them back. They can also email us and we will either email them back or call them. So any manner of queries and questions can come in. Obviously, if people are worried they're having a relapse, they will call us and we can talk to them about how that's arisen, how it started, what the symptoms are. Sometimes, it might not be a relapse. It might be more likely to be a pseudo relapse. So by talking to the patients about how it's occurred and what else is going on for them, because, stress could be exacerbating their normal MS symptoms and behaving like a relapse, where actually it's not a relapse. It could be infection as well, tiredness, heat. We find that the calls about possible relapses we find in the summer will always go up, especially during the really warm spells. Things like around Christmas, we might see an increase in calls because people are really stressed out, So yeah, supporting people with that. Yeah, that's the main.
In my experience, you kind of project manage my MS so that there's the neurologist who prescribes disease modifying therapies, but it's my MS nurse who sorts out getting blood tests arranged. It's her who puts me in contact with the neurophysio to get physio treatment. So she kind of connects everything else. Well, actually, we now. Actually, I'm going replacing it. Yeah, but yeah, sitting in the middle is everything is the MS nurse in my experience.
Absolutely, it's almost like a coordinator. So sort of we do a lot of signposting to other services. So for instance, like you say, referrals to like continence services or physio, OT, or other services like, I don't know, it's like a centre that does sort of like hyperbaric oxygen, things like that. We don't usually signpost people there, to be honest, but people might call us up and ask about that, and we're aware it's there, and we can say, oh yes, this is there. I do get people calling up and asking about diet sometimes, but it's quite rare, to be honest.
And so if you've got someone who wants to talk to their healthcare professionals about overcoming MS? Because I mean, I kind of it's changed over my time of having MS. Like initially there was huge resistance, and now much less so because I think they've learned a lot more and there's a lot more knowledge. And it's very normalized actually. I mean, veganism has become quite a normal thing and quite publicized as well. But certainly that wasn't always the case. So do you have any tips to talk to healthcare professionals about adopting overcoming MS?
Yes. So I would say don't expect them to know about it, basically, if I'm honest. Most of them will not know. In my experience, I will often get patients say to me things like, "Oh, I've stopped eating meat, but I do eat fish, and apart from that, I'm vegan." And and because they're talking to me, then I will usually say to them, you're not looking at the Overcoming MS program by any chance, are you? Don't think you're going to get that with, most MS nurses. But so I would say don't expect them to know. And I think it's a really nice opportunity for you to be able to teach them. And I think that's a really good thing to be able to do. Um, so, and I think if you come across resistance from them, I don't think there's an awful lot of point in sort of becoming resentful about that, or because that's not going to achieve anything at the end of the day. At the end of the day, there is lots of support within overcoming MS if you're not getting it from your MS nurse or your neurologist. I think a lot of healthcare professionals are becoming better at being open about these things and perhaps listening to people and not rubbishing diet and things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, so for our neurologist, for example, did not know about overcoming MS until I've been working in this team. He does know about it now, but he always advocated for a good healthy diet in addition to medication and but he wouldn't be saying to someone to give up meat and dairy. That would be part of his healthy diet. So yeah, I think there's a long way to go, I think, before the NHS services are going to catch up with something like overcoming MS. And yeah, I would just say good luck.
And do you have any tips that you'd give to a newly diagnosed person or to your newly diagnosed self when you had MS?
Yes, I do. Be kind to yourself. It's a massive thing to take on board a diagnosis of MS. Don't expect too much of yourself, and if you're looking at taking on the program, just take it easy on yourself. Don't if it feels too much, then just do what you can a little bit at a time. And when I started out with overcoming MS, there was nothing really. The charity had only just started, You know, there was no website. I had the book. I had Georgie's book, and that was it really. And I was lucky enough that that conference happened, and then I was kind of on my own really. But these days, you know, there's the website, which is amazing, so much information on there. So, you know, connects with that. We've got the Overcoming MS circles, you know, get yourself into an Overcoming MS circle, because, you know, I've learned so much from being a member of circle, you know, like flaxseed thing that I referred to earlier on. I didn't learn about where to buy flaxseed oil until I became part of a Overcoming MS circle, and that was many years into the program, you know. So you can get so much from that, and people will be really supportive, and you know, you can swap recipes and, you know, get hints and tips from each other. So yeah, I would say join the circle.
And because they're localized as well. So, well, there's local ones, and
Mm,
there's also ones for different subject areas, if you like. So there's progressive
yeah,
one,
yeah,
but the local ones are useful because, I mean, we could chat to each other about flax farm as a flax oil, but that's no use to someone in America, because
that's
you
true.
need to
That's
get those
true.
local providers, and
Yes,
they're going to be different. There'll be different products in different countries for all sorts of things, and they probably have different cookbooks, which, you know, I wouldn't understand when I see American recipes. I go to America a lot with work, but I still don't understand half the recipe because they use different words for everything. You think, what is cilantro and what is zucchini and what is, and because we just use different terms, so localizing everything is much easier in many ways. So I'd say, yeah, circles are really good for that sort of thing, because otherwise you'll end up
absolutely.
importing flax oil from the UK.
Excuse me. It's all this talking.
That's fine. So you're training to become an MS facilitator. So what's involved in being a facilitator for overcoming MS?
So qualified as a facilitator now, Jeff.
Oh, you are qualified. I apologize. You're
Yes,
qualified then.
hot off the press this week. Yeah, but I've got to send some stuff in. So yes, so that's been taking place over the last year, which has been amazing. And tomorrow, actually, I'm going to go and deliver a presentation at the Manchester pop-up, where I'm going to be doing an overview of the Overcoming MS program. So the training has been sort of supported by a mentor, and you know, regular meetings and attending events, as an observer, and then taking part. And so yeah, I've been doing various things over the last year, in order to, yeah, get to the point where I'm at now, where I'm being given license to facilitate, which I'll be doing tomorrow. Um, so which is wonderful, because it's such a fantastic opportunity to be able to share sort of my knowledge and experience of the program, with others, you know, because you know, I look back on my time just coming to new to the program. You know, it would have been amazing to have had access to such things then, you know. So I feel really privileged to be able to have that opportunity, to be of help to other people with MS who are interested in the program, which of
And
course is amazing.
So we touched on mindfulness, but you've done an MSc in mindfulness studies as well as being an MS nurse and an overcoming MS facilitator. You also have an MSc in mindfulness studies. So can we talk a bit more about that? So I mean, most of us have, well, everyone I'd say probably has stress. It's a normal part of the human condition. So what's the best methods really of dealing with stress, and trying to include mindfulness? Because it does. I mean, I think anyone with MS, I think it's one of the fairly common thing. If you getting stress, your symptoms get exacerbated by it. Some people are affected by heat, some people by cold, some people are different things. But I think most people would say if they get stressed, then their symptoms flare up. So there's definitely a link there, and I think most of us realise that. So how can we deal with that in our daily life?
Absolutely. Stress is a subject I have almost on a daily basis with my patients. I call it my stress talk now. So yeah, and I know for me, certainly stress is my trigger. If I get stressed, which I don't very much these days, but if I do, all my symptoms come alive, you know. And when I was diagnosed, that was a highly stressful time, you know. My mum was dying and I was very, very stressed. So I know that for me, stress is one of my triggers. Well, my biggest trigger, I know that. So it's very important to me that I manage that as best I can. And obviously, the Overcoming MS program suggests mindfulness as the stress management side of the program. And so I, you know, and I already mentioned how I'd gone through this whole mindfulness journey to, I suppose, you know, I'm not very good at sort of allowing myself to say, you know, actually I'm quite an expert in it, but I suppose I am. So yes, I would say that mindfulness is really, really good at managing stress. And the reason for that, of course, is that stress is a physiological response in the body with that fight or flight response. And if we're practicing mindfulness, that is activating the parasympathetic part of our nervous system, which is in opposition to the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for that fight or flight response. So in the parasympathetic nervous system will switch that off. So we become less stressed just by sitting down, focusing on our breathing, slowing it down, and it just. And then the ongoing practice of mindfulness, what it teaches you, and this is why I would encourage people to go off and learn more about it, because it's, you know, it becomes more and more, and I'm still learning more, and my practice is still getting deeper and developing. But what happens is that you start to become much more aware, of your thoughts and things that are happening around you. Just this awareness grows and develops. And that in itself then you become far less reactive to what is happening around you. You just learn to sit in amongst, no, and I'm trying to think of what I can't think of his name either. This is one of my MS things. Things just go out my head. I'm sure people can sympathise with
John
that.
Kabat-Zinn or someone like
No,
that,
not John
or
Kabat-Zinn. No, it might come back to me in a minute. Anyway,
I mean, could you talk us
he's
through a practice though that you enjoyed doing?
What's my favourite practice? My favourite practice, I suppose, is, and it is developed by this person that I can't remember his name at the moment. So it's called resting in the midst of it all. So, and this is very much recognizing that, you know, we're all a mess. Everything around us is a mess. We're a mess. It's like everything's a mess, but we're just kind of like sitting here in the middle of it all, quite happy. And we're not affected by it, you know, and we're just sitting here in amongst it and just accepting it as it is without trying to change any of it. You know, and it's like I will regularly say to my patients, we can't change what's going on outside of us. We can't change that stressy situation at work. We can't change the, I don't know, the builders coming in and messing up. We can't change any of that, but we can change our response to it, and that's what we need to work on. And mindfulness helps with that. So this practice resting in the midst of it all, we would start by settling our mind, grounding into the body, and then just resting. And I love that. I kind of imagine this kind of like opening my awareness out, um, and just resting it here in the midst of everything that's happening in my head and around me. And yeah, just really enjoy sitting there. Not sort of like not thinking about like, oh, that's Mary, she's mowing the grass, you know, why can't she, you know, mow her grass at a different time than when I'm trying to practice my mindfulness, you know. Not having these, oh, you know, you can have the thoughts, obviously you can't stop them, but and if you have them, just let them go, and then just keep coming back to this practice, this resting in the midst of it, or just allowing everything to be just as it is.
And do you have any suggestions for people who are looking to increase their mindfulness? So is there tips how you get more mindfulness into your life?
So yes, of course. So I've been talking mainly sort of about the formal practice of meditation, if you like. So we call that formal sitting practice, and then we've got informal practice, which is mindfulness as you go about your daily life. Because of course what we do often is we go about stuff on autopilot and we're not really aware of what we're doing. And you can actually intentionally do this by sort of like having the intention that, okay, well, I'm going to brush my teeth mindfully every day for the next week or whatever, and just really become aware of brushing your teeth or drinking a cup of tea or whatever it might be, or doing the washing up, you know, feeling the temperature of the water, the bubbles, and the, you know, just really feeling and becoming aware of what you're doing. So that's what we call informal practice. Um, and people will often say to me as well, what they'll say, oh well, I you know, I really enjoy walking the dog in the woods, and I become aware of, you know, the sound of the leaves and the you know, the twigs cracking beneath my feet and all of this, and the birds singing and blah 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 and all this kind of thing. And that's great, that's beautiful, and that's really good. But um what concerns me sometimes is that people think that they can just do that and that's their mindfulness practice and they don't need to do anything else. I would discourage that because I think we need both. I think we need the formal practice as well as the informal practice.
Okay. So you set some time aside and say, right, that's half an hour of mindfulness practice, but also then you put in the little, because there's like little comma ones. There's a lot of them on the Overcoming MS website, and I think they call it a comma meditation, which I find a really handy one if you're getting a bit stressed, because you just like take a breath, and that can be quite a handy thing. But that's in addition to the, I'm going to have half an hour here of mindfulness. But then day to day, I'm also going to clean my teeth mindfully. I'm going to eat food mindfully, and try and bring in as much as you can.
Yeah,
Okay.
try and bring in as much as you can. Obviously, the more that you can do, the better. And yeah, like you say, the taking a breath. So we have something in the mindfulness that I teach called the 3-minute breathing space. And that's just about just taking that little sort of break, if you like, and just to become aware of the breath, become aware of the body, open out the awareness to, a wider awareness, and then bring it back again to the breath. And yeah, just for like 3 minutes. And I've often said, you can do this sitting on the loo. So if I get a bit stressed at work, I might take myself off to the loo, do a 3-minute breathing space, come back much better, in much better shape to face whatever it was that sent me there in the first place.
Thank you very much for that. And so, just to wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for someone who's got MS, maybe they're new to the Overcoming MS program?
I kind of thought I'd covered that earlier. Don't have any final thoughts for. I would say. I think so. When I was, first diagnosed and first discovered the program, what I remember thinking to myself is, what have I got to lose? What have I got to lose by maybe eating a bit more healthily, doing a bit more exercise, doing a bit of mindfulness? What have I got to lose? What is there to gain? I think that's what I would say to the newly diagnosed, new to the Overcoming MS program.
Yeah, no, it's good, and that mirrors what Aaron Boster says about anything new. He just says, look at the potential benefits, look at the potential negatives, and look at how much money it's going to cost you as well. He said, if it's not going to cost you very much money, then just weigh up those two things, and that's where you think, well, you start to come out with the negatives being you might miss cheese and meat, but then the positives might be that you might actually have much better,
Exactly.
healthier life.
I usually sort of, when people say to me, "Oh, I could never give up cheese," try not to say this to them, but what I kind of think is, let me think about this for a second. Cheese or walk? No choice there for me. Seems a bit harsh, I know, but to me, back then when I was, I used to love cheese. To me, I would far rather be able to keep well and healthy and active than
And I think
eat
people
cheese.
who might have progressive MS and may not be able to walk now, I still think
True,
it's huge
true.
benefits. And
It's very individual, isn't it, Jeff?
yeah,
It's so different for everyone. So it's really hard to, but I suppose, you'd ask me about sort of newly diagnosed, maybe, or maybe I'm thinking newly diagnosed, new to the program, So yeah, we all start off at different places, but yeah, indeed.
you're just giving yourself the best chance, aren't you? I think that's the key.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's whatever makes sense to you, because yeah, some people I'm sure would rather, eat cheese.
Okay, so with that, thank you very much for joining us, Sue Tibbles, and maybe we'll see you at an Overcoming MS event in the future as a facilitator.
Oh, you will, I'm sure. Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find useful links and bonus information there. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and please rate and review the show to help others find us. This show is made possible by the Overcoming MS community. Our theme music is by Claire and Nab Dean. Our host is Jeff Alex. Our videos are edited by Lorna Greenwood, and I'm the producer, Regina Beach. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. The Living Well with MS podcast is for private, non-commercial use and exists to educate and inspire our community of listeners. We do not offer medical advice. For medical advice, please contact your doctor or other licensed healthcare professional.